So thank you.
Love it. Patience is hard. Yeah. Yeah, I got that here.
Nope.
So are we changed on the employee handbook piece?
Okay, it is 6:30 tonight. I'm going to call this meeting to order. And we'll start with roll call.
Weber. Weber.
Here.
Nystrom.
Here.
Teben.
Here.
Pritchard.
Here.
Malhouse.
Here. Okay, first item on the agenda is recognition of visitors. Seeing none here tonight except for our administrative staff, we'll move on to consideration of agenda. Mrs. Drupa, is there any changes to the agenda?
No, there are no changes to the agenda.
Okay, I will entertain a motion for approval of the agenda as printed.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved by Dr. Nystrom, seconded by Reverend Weber to approve the agenda as printed. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next is hearing from delegations. Public comment, seeing none. Once again, we'll move on to the routine consent agenda. Do I have a motion for an approval there?
Was there anything online?
Pat, I move to accept
Thing
the
yet.
step for a Pritchard Brothers bill of $161.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Stevens, seconded by Mr. Pritchard to approve the consent agenda as printed with the withdrawal of a Pritchard bill for $161 for separate consideration. Is there any discussion or questions? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed, nay. The consent agenda passes. We now have to go back and have another motion for the Pritchard bill.
I move to accept the Pritchard's bill of $161.
Second.
Yeah, it's been moved by Ms. Stevens, seconded by Dr. Nystrom to approve the Pritchard bill for $161. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Abstention?
Abstain.
Okay, motion passes by 4 votes. Mr. Pritchard abstaining. Moving on is a public hearing on the revisions to the 2020-2021 school calendar. At 6:34 p.m., I am calling this public hearing to opening the public hearing. Anyone comments? Mr. Trupa, can you perhaps give us a brief explanation?
Yes,
So the calendar Suggestions are to move our start date back by 1 week. So instead of an August 24th start date, it would be August 31st.
Middle school and high
High
school
school
would
would
start at that time.
Elementary would start on September 2nd.
School would then run through to
to June
4th.
4th. And the calendar that's presented also has our third Wednesday early release listed as well. So
We ask,
we had acted on that in previous board meeting, but I want to call attention to that
change as well.
can we ask Mitch to turn off his volume? So much, we can barely understand you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll try this again. Is that any better? Okay, evidently. So again, I'll just repeat that on the calendar, the differences from the previous board meeting, we had a third Wednesday of every month. We're adding the early release that we had previously approved. But we also have a suggestion of moving the start date back 5 days. So we would start August 31st for middle school and high school, September 2nd for elementary, and we would run through June 4th for our students. So June 4th would be the end date for the school year.
Want to verify that this would not affect teacher contracts in any way?
Correct. So this is not adding professional development days at all. All it is doing is shifting the school year back 5 days.
What's a typical start of the year look like for teachers, their first week? Is it normal to have 5 in-service days before? No, sorry, that's 4 days, right? Currently 25, 6th, 7th, and 8th would be teacher days with no students. Is that normal, or is that an extension on what we normally have?
I will let Jill respond, but we are not changing our dates. What we're doing, we're changing to allow for more time for our teachers, but I'll let Jill explain the past, and then she can say how it's changing for the future.
4 days is typical. And there have been years where we've had the additional teacher quality day that's outside of their contract. It's an additional day of professional development, and it's spaced throughout the calendar. Some years it's been before school, but most years it's in the calendar. And this year it is in the calendar in January. So 4 days is the typical amount of paid contract time for teachers before school starts. And typically we bring back support staff for 1 day. Last year we brought back support staff for 2 professional development days before school started, and we're advocating to do the same thing again this year. So there would be 4 days for teachers, 2 of those days including support staff, and Mrs. Trepp and I have spoken about the majority of the time during those days is time in buildings with a brief district meeting and some policies, procedures, and things that all employees are going to need to go over and feel prepared for, especially with the unique year ahead of us. But much of that time is time for those teachers to do the things they need to do to be prepared.
So it's really no different than any other school year. It's just shifted a week.
Correct.
Because overwhelmingly what I hear from teachers is that they would like additional days to prepare before students come. So I'm not sure that shifting it is really a benefit to the teachers. I mean, I understand it would be a benefit to scheduling and preparing the buildings, but as far as benefit to the teacher, the comments that I hear most often are like the other in-service days that we have throughout the year. You can see them highlighted clearly there in yellow. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 at least. If those could be front loaded so that they could have additional paid days where they could, prepare for students before the buildings are full. Is that a possibility, or has that been discussed?
So that is something that we discussed. And one of the reasons that we did not elect to move those days away and shift them to the front of the school year was because we do have some individuals contracted to come do professional development during those days. One of them being for the special education staff. We also know that with this being such a unique year and being potentially in and out of different modes of learning, that we will probably arrive at those days and very much need those days to adjust the learning that we're doing at the beginning of the year, because as I think any staff member can attest to, it's one thing to receive the information and learn, but once you've been able to try and apply that learning, that's when most of your questions come up. And so that was one of the reasons why we didn't want to take away the days during the year, is because that will be the time that they will be able to regroup after they've been able to apply some of the things that they're going to be learning at the beginning of the year, and be able to regroup and make adjustments by having that time. So that's the reason we didn't do that. This simply adding days is a financial difficulty. To add an extra 4 days for the entire staff, it was not financially feasible. We do think we might be able to do a day, maybe here or there, shifting some funds around, but that's maybe something we were going to explore once we knew what was happening with the shifting of the days for the students.
We also know that we do have the addition of that Wednesday approved in the calendar, the additional Wednesday early out. But that time was really intended to be time for teachers to be able to collaborate and have time built in throughout, almost every other week. They'd have a little bit of additional time to adjust and work collaboratively together. And so we were hesitant to take all of the full day professional learning days out throughout the year, for fear that then those 2 hours would be taken for the professional learning that might need to happen, instead of really be given to the teachers as time to collaborate, address the remote learning needs, whatever might be going on. So we wanted to protect those 2-hour Wednesdays as best we could.
No, I understand all that. I think, it makes a lot of sense, but I think a lot of people think that year is kind of be a survival year, and maybe not a year for a lot of professional growth. And whether or not we need those days for regrouping or whatever the justification were, that may be, but they know they need them now. I think that's their argument, and they got a lot on their plate. I think of the teachers I talked to thought that 4 days just to wrap their heads around switching to standards reference-based grading would be a lot, let alone tackling the COVID issue at the start of the year. I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that that's the message I've heard loud and clear from a lot of teachers on really advocating for extra days. I know 4 days sounds like a lot, but it's really not when you get into the thick of things. So I understand the reasoning, but that's what I've heard from quite a few people.
Well, and I want to acknowledge that we also have heard that, and that's why we did have a pretty lengthy discussion around that topic. So certainly we appreciate that they have shared that same concern. But I do think that we have organized the beginning of the year days completely differently than I think they've ever seen before. And so hopefully they'll be able to see how they will have more time than maybe they anticipate, based on what their previous experiences have been.
How many instructional hours are on this calendar? Because every year we have more in-chair time than are required, correct? I mean, we vote to whether or not to make up snow days because they're not necessary. I mean, I just want to make sure we're exploring every option to give our teachers what they need in the beginning of the year.
So
real quickly, first I'd like to close the public hearing part, because this is just for board members now, and you guys kind of got away from me here. So hearing no further public discussion, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion. We are going to the board's going to discuss it. And the one question I had was, to start this, is that originally, I think we had May 28th. There was a work day at the end of the year. Where did that work day disappear to?
We shifted that to a student learning day, knowing that we had lost some instructional hours by adding those extra 2-hour Wednesdays in to the calendar. And so the teacher contract days remain the same. There's one less professional development day to give them that time throughout the school year. And then that also meant that we had 4, shifting the start date back 5 days meant that there were 4 student days that really needed to be made up. And that allowed us to have the end date at a nice round Friday the 4th, and also have the same amount of contract days for teachers in, just with one less full day of PD, knowing there was that time throughout.
This is Pam, and I think at our last meeting when we discussed this, it gave I kind of am in agreement with Jeremy from what I've heard from staff. It gave people the idea that staff development was going to be reorganized so they would have more time to prepare for COVID-19. That was some people's impression. That was my impression. So I just thought, that probably was why people are wondering.
Well, and I think that I can understand where maybe that came from, because from our perspective, there's more time than there would have been, but it's not necessarily different contractual days. And I believe the last time we had the board meeting and I had made the comment that we were looking to move the calendar, I do recall someone asking about the contract and if that changed the contract at all. And that would have been the only indication that it did not add days, because I did at that time reference the fact that the contract was not changed, the contractual days were not changing. Because if we were to add the professional development days onto it, then that would have changed contractually. And we were hesitant to do that at the last board meeting time because we had not had any kind of conversations. I don't like to make it a practice to look to change contracts without having conversations with our teachers.
Yeah. Are we gonna? I'll ask this question to Jill. Are we gonna have extra technology, opportunities so people feel more comfortable in the event that becomes our life in the future again?
I am glad you asked that today. I met with our instructional coaching team, and there's 3 instructional coaches that really focus in on technology integration, and kind of went through their plans for what supports teachers might need at different levels, knowing our elementary teachers need different supports than those at secondary, and that the amount and the ways that they're doing the online might be supporting online would look different. And we came up with, or what they've come up with really, I think, is supportive for teachers to help really get them started and going and feeling confident to begin the year, but also for some ongoing supports so that we don't throw too much in those first days, because we really want to make sure that we reserve time for teachers to, and all staff, all of our support staff too, to digest all of the things that they're trying to adapt and adjust to. So the main, I can speak to the main things that are really not necessarily scheduled, but will be a part of that building level professional development, is the preparing teachers for remote and online work and to be able to switch between various models if need be. And then the health and safety training that we all need to make sure that we're clear on our protocols to keep everybody safe at school. And then anything additional is social emotional supports for staff and for thinking about ways to support our students when they return. So those are our 3 big items that we want to be mindful of, but also knowing that social emotional support may just be the gift of time. And that is something that we want to reserve for our staff.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions from board members?
If we switch and look at it as an hours-based schedule instead of a days-based schedule, does that free anything up for us?
It could. As far as looking at the hours, I don't know what Boone has done in the past with regard to the extra hours. I know that in previous experiences, we had purposely chosen the extra hours for those moments when you might not be able to be on site and you plan to, so you may not have to make it up. But I suppose you could plan to just not make up some of those days and make them contractual days.
Did they change the regulations on making up snow days this year? I can't remember if that was something that we would just go online,
they
right?
changed. What they did is they did make it in the proclamation, or the governor did have in her proclamation, that we could do snow days online. The one thing that I would make sure people are aware of is that means we've had advance notice to ensure that everyone has a device at home and the teachers can actually teach online. If that were to surprise us some morning and we didn't want to make it up, it would be difficult to justify not making it up if we don't have the tools in order to teach online.
But the trade-off would be having extra days for the teachers now and then making up snow days later. Am I correct in that? We'd be forced to make up the snow days instead of having the option because we met the hours. I mean, we've had the option the past 2 years because we've had sufficient hours. So if we took those hours now, knowing that if we weren't prepared to go online for snow days, we'd be forced to make those days up like we always vote to do anyways. I'm just trying to make sure we explore every option to give the teachers the days that they really, really want.
That's true.
If we're talking about teachers needing more days to prepare, has there been any thought of even just pushing back till after Labor Day? Because, I mean, as I look at this calendar, we're going to go for, well, our little ones are going to go for 3 days, then have Labor Day weekend, then go back. And so it kind of makes sense to me to just start after Labor Day and give the extra days as needed.
I think the problem is we got to figure out how to pay those teachers so that they can do the work that they want to do. If we just shift the schedule, then the teachers' days are the same. The prep days are the same. It just gets moved back. We need to be able to give them extra days at the beginning of the year.
I will say that one of the advantages of starting on a Wednesday for the elementary is that it's not a full week when they haven't been in school for over 5 months. That is something that I think elementary staff will appreciate, starting 3 days, having time off, and then coming back.
We have 1, 2, 3, we've got 4 professional development days later in the year, with 2 of them being a month apart, the 18th and the 18th of January and the 15th of February. Those 2 dates, they're back to back. Are those both where we have contracted people coming in to talk?
October, January, and April, I believe, are the 3 that I know of.
Actually, January is the teacher quality day. Initially, I had those days flipped. So January is the day that is the additional day outside of their contracted 187 days. That day could be flexible and move and become a student contact day. That's Martin Luther King Day. And so that's one of the reasons we've used that one, and President's Day and Good Friday in the past as a day for professional development, because that allowed families that flexibility to have that day with their children if need be. But we could shift that one because that is an additional one with nobody else contracted to come in.
Yeah, could we pull the 18th up to the 21st? That way they get a full week there. Take the 18th of January, make that a day off, and bring the teachers back on the 24th instead of the 25th.
Jill, doesn't teacher quality need to
week.
be approved by the committee?
Yes.
Yes.
Just wanted to point that out.
Yes. So any TQ day, the teacher quality committee would need to approve it. I don't anticipate that being a problem, but that would be something that we need to make sure occurs.
I'm just wondering, because that way the teachers will get an extra day that they want, and yet we wouldn't have to worry about going later and get everything started. Get your 3-day weekend for your elementary kids that first week. So just throwing that out as a possibility.
Yeah, I really, really, really like the idea of a 3-day week for our little pumpkins, because it helps them just get a little bit of time and then a weekend to recoup. We're going to retrain every day anyway, and just their stamina at this point of the year. It's nice. I mean, Monday through Friday is so long for them. And so it's really nice if we can do midweek, and so it's not a full week for them from the beginning. I think that's huge for them.
I'm doing a quick calculation on hours for you, Jeremy. With the having taken out or added those additional Wednesdays, I need to recalculate what we report based on our whatever school building has the lowest amount of minutes. And so I'm quickly recalculating that one for you.
Hey, Autumn, is there any benefit to the little ones going half days to start off so they can get used to the mitigation strategies and wearing their masks? I mean, jumping straight in, even if it's a short week, for a full day of wearing masks when they haven't done that might be a challenge.
So we've already kind of put that in place for our preschoolers. Our PLC leader on that throughout the idea of the first day being half the class, and then the second day, so that's Thursday, Friday for preschool right now in the schedule. So Thursday is half the class, Friday is half the class for preschool. And then Monday, they'd be all back together to give them a half day to talk about procedures and protocols and all of that too. So preschool, because there's an AM and a PM, when we shorten those days, then one section doesn't get to come. So that would be a negative of shortening the days for everybody, because we have AM, PM preschool. We've already kind of included that transition for preschool. I mean, I think the kids are going to teach us a lot about what they need for this transition during this time, for sure. Yeah, and I don't know too, minute wise, we have to count whoever has the shortest amount of minutes. So I think then that would bring our hours down for the district, because then that would be shortened for everyone, even if they went the full time. But yeah, I mean, time is always a precious gift. So yeah, I think we'd have to weigh out the pros and the cons for that.
And I do want to also express the need to move it back and shift is still there for a lot of our health and safety measures. We have items that we ordered in March that were supposed to come in last week that we don't have. And so we're really hoping by having that extra week that will allow us to make sure that we've got absolutely everything we need. And we do have a fix to an elevator that we need to have done that would definitely the extra week will allow us to make sure that the elevator can be fixed in time. So there are
Very
some
large
things that
concern.
need to occur that are outside of just needing extra professional development time, but also just being prepared in other ways.
If my quick calculations are correct, I mean, we would have, should have enough hours in our lowest building that we would report that those 4 days, we could move those from instructional days and we would still be within the hours that we need to meet the 1080 with some to spare too.
Which 4 days are those?
Well, the days that I guess it depends on how we do them or what we do. So the calendar on the board docs now would be shifted, but the 4 additional days that by shifting the calendar back became June, whatever they were.
June 4th was the date that it was going to shift to.
Right. So if we were to include additional professional development days and still have teachers return, next week or on the 24th or whatever we wanted to build in for additional days there that were teacher PD days, we do have the instructional hours that we could do that and just not add those instructional, as many or all 4 instructional days back onto the end of the calendar.
So what you would be proposing, what I'm hearing is that would mean we'd go have the last day of school June 3rd instead of June 4th. Take the 8 hours, the teacher contract for June 4th, and move it up to August 24th. And then keep the January 18th as it is, and the other 3 professional days or teacher and service days as they are.
I'm saying that could be an option.
Or we could also move that January date, I think is what
we would just
saying.
need to reconvene the teacher quality committee and not be
Right.
able to vote on that change tonight.
Yeah.
Wait,
Right.
excuse me, this is Pam. Which of those days is the teacher quality day again?
It's January 18th.
So April 2nd, I understand that that's Good Friday. But
We do have a contracted provider coming in in October and February and April.
that was my question. So the 18th is the day to move. Okay. If we can work that out with our teacher quality team. Okay. I think that might be a good idea. That's one more day to get ready for the unknown. There's no knowns. And so that might ease people's anxiety a bit to know they have another day to practice their technology and get their questions answered.
I'm not sure if it needs to be a day where you present PD, but an extra day once the PD is presented for them to be able to work, I think would be very beneficial.
Oh, I agree, Pat. I agree. Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do is limit the amount of time we're having to actually teach. I mean, there's some instruction that needs to happen, but I think we really wanted to give them that time. So we are completely in favor of providing them whatever we can do to help them be successful. But we definitely wanted to be respectful of the fact that we do acknowledge during the year, in addition to having a contracted person coming in, but I do think we want to make sure that we build that in too. I don't want to just front load and then forget people. We need to make sure we're supporting everyone all the way through the school year. So I think that as I'm not sure how we need to do this when we have to meet with the teacher quality committee. I don't know
That's
if
the
the
part I'm
board,
not sure about.
if
I
the
know I could
board
take it.
could pre-approve it, and as long as the teacher quality committee can meet with us and get that done, I don't know how that works.
We're
And then I
absolutely
don't know, does that become just to be clear on what we would be considering, does the January 18th day, right now that falls outside of the contract? So that would just be a day off for teachers and students?
No,
No,
we're moving it to the front of the year so they can
yeah,
have it in the front.
Correct. So then that becomes I mean, it's an additional day outside of the contract, I
Right.
guess. So if we're moving it to the front on the 24th, that's actually moving the start date back only 4 days, not 5 days. So I guess what I'm saying is what does that day turn into then? Is it a kid day or not?
it could be a kid day.
I'm not sure I'm clear, and I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page with what we might be proposing that day becomes.
Yeah,
Well, there's two options there.
6 days.
Option number one would be you move that into kid day and you, last day of school is June 3rd. Option number two is you honor the Martin Luther King holiday and everyone has it off, teachers and staff included. And then you move on, which given our equity issues that we've been talking about, honoring Dr. King by giving everyone the day off instead of just the students and having the teachers work might not be the worst thing in the world either.
I propose to the board here, that's up for discussion. Just we want to make sure we're clear on what we would do with that day if we move the teacher quality day, since it is an additional contracted day.
So
And
there's
teachers then could be clear that that is an additional contracted day. So if teachers, if we moved that day to the 24th, it is an optional day. So our teachers could choose to, or we could shift it, we could put that day wherever, either on the Monday or the Friday, but teachers could choose if they're using that one or not, because it is an additional day and they'd have the choice.
I guess
Friday, so they have one more day after they've had the PD to put things into practice.
I'm still not clear why we can't just leave the calendar like it is with teachers returning on the 25th and make the 31st, 1st, and 2nd additional days based on extra hours. Teachers would be in the building there. The kids would start 3 days later. If we could still meet the hours for them to adjourn on the 4th, be done with school on the 4th, just like the calendar says.
One thing just to think about in that mix is that means Friday. So in
Oh.
2 days, new teachers would be starting. And if we don't have those sanitation tools that we're waiting to come in, we wouldn't have it ready for teachers starting that day as well. And so just some of that prep before they get here so that they have a smooth transition is a priority to our team as well.
But Autumn, we're moving it back, the start date back to after Labor Day. Instead
The
of,
start date for students, but new teachers are set to start Friday in 2 days. So unless we're moving everything back.
Yes.
I'm confused.
New teachers are supposed to be starting the 21st, right, on that Friday, and then,
It would
On what's
push back a
proposed
week
here.
from this week.
yeah.
If we weren't going to change the calendar at all, they would be starting Friday. If we push it back a week, they start the 21st, I think is what that Friday is.
That's what it says.
So if I'm hearing Mr. Pritchard correctly, he is suggesting that we also add the, say, 1st and 2nd, or 31st and 1st, possibly the 2nd, maybe the 31st and 1st is what he's proposing, as
Yes.
additional teacher professional development days to prepare, and then we do not make up those days at the end of the calendar.
Yes, that's what he's saying.
The other thing we have to remember is what are we doing with these? We're giving the third Wednesday afternoon, we're gonna have a 2 hour late or 2 hour early dismissal in those 2 days too. And that's gonna be teacher support too, I'm assuming. And so we talk about having to keep our teachers gotta remember that we are gonna be giving them those extra 2 hours. They're gonna have every other Wednesday, they're gonna have extra 2 hours to kind of reassemble and look and see what's been working, both online and
That
in person, and where we need to go. So
that
will be
will
some extra time.
that will also be plan time. That won't just be teacher time. We've taken away their PLC time in the morning to make them supervise students when they come into the building. So our intent is for that to be PLC planning time on those days, because we've taken that away in the morning. So it wouldn't just be individual work time.
I'd also like to advocate for the teachers, saying that we are moving teachers from not solely in-person teaching, but they're also online, which is a whole nother job. So I think we're trying to build in as much time to give them to be able to support their needs and their mental health and well-being to better suit our students.
I have a question then for Scott and Chris. So if our older students had a 3-day week to start, I can't see that that would be a problem for students. You know, older students going 5 days the first week sometimes is taxing.
I would say that it's beneficial to probably lessen the load the first week. We're going to hit them with a ton of stuff, a lot of relearning. It's very similar to what's going on with the elementary students, that there are a lot of changes going on. They haven't been in school since before spring break. And we have a lot of different changes, whether it's online, all the different aspects that are going to be happening within the school. And we're going to have to take a lot of time to train and teach and practice that. And so, yes, it is going to be very taxing. You're right.
Do our older students have more hours already built in than our younger students, because the younger students start later and that's when we have to start the clock on the hours?
We count those hours, right, for conferences. They're part of our time. So that's something to think about too. If the high school starts on a Wednesday and middle school, then that means our kids have one day and then they have a weekend and then they come back again. So that just splits our start time. So they only have one day to get used to it too. So that's just something to think about when you think about that schedule.
I'm just wondering why the whole district can't start with your schedule, Autumn, if the hours are counted off of the fewest number of minutes anyways. The high school students are have extra hours built in already, if I'm assuming correctly that the hours are counted off of the lower grade levels because they have fewer instructional hours.
The level that has the fewest number of hours is actually middle school.
Because those do still count as instructional days because they're instructional conference days, those do still count as instructional hours for the elementary.
But if autumn were to start for kids on Wednesday, the high school start on Wednesday, and that would mean your teachers would have to do their conferences on Monday and Tuesday, would lose that time. Otherwise, your teachers would do it on Wednesday and Thursday. Then you only got one day, and then you got a 3-day weekend.
And I would really advocate this of all years, that we don't take away that conference time. A lot of our kids haven't been in our buildings. They missed kindergarten experience day. They've never been at school before. And I've had a lot of parents reach out looking for that time to connect with teachers. So I really think those conference days, I think Brad would agree if you were here, that those are just vital to our preparation, especially this year, if not every year.
Explain to me what the conference days are, Autumn.
So they meet with all of our families. Our preschoolers do home visits. This year they're going to do yard visits, but they meet with all the families. So they have like a 15-minute conference. They kind of brief you on what the school year is going to look like for your kids. It's a time to tell the classroom teacher specific things about your child they need to know, like they're scared when the potty flushes, or they still can't tie their shoes, or you need help zipping their coat, or they have this food allergy that they don't understand. Or some of our older elementary students, they can check in about some struggles they've had in the past and things that work well for them. It's kind of the first chance for the parents and the teacher to connect when it's just one-on-one time with around that child. And it's just 15 minutes. And we just schedule them all day. One of the days starts at noon because it goes into the evening. So that way teachers, they aren't contracted to come in the morning because it goes until 8 o'clock at night. And then the other day we do a regular school day from 8 to 3. So that way you can give a variety of parents the hours that they need with their work schedule. Oftentimes kids come with them, and so it's an opportunity for them to meet their teacher. This year in particular, we won't be doing our open house night. So that would be an opportunity for them as well. And the nice thing about it is it's scheduled in a way that we can ask them to use different doors, and there's only certain parents in the building at a time. They wait outside the door, so we can do some of our mitigating features with that too.
And
Is that kind of question, Jeremy?
yep. And when do those days start with you? The same day the high school starts?
Yeah, so their first day is our first conference day. So their first 2 days of school are our 2 conference days.
And I would advocate that our elementary teachers would, also benefit from that additional prep time. And so I would hate to have all buildings start on the same date, but elementary teachers do parent conferences for the 2 days prior to that. I just don't feel that they would feel prepared for those conferences if we took those out of what could have been professional development days. On either, whatever we do with professional development, I still think they need those as additional days.
Okay. It's been a very interesting discussion. Now I think it's time that we try a motion. Remember, the original proposal is what you have printed. You're in the original proposal presented to us by our administration is to start on the 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th with teacher in service, and then bring kids into the classroom on August 31st. That is a proposal from the administration that they have bantered around amongst their teacher leadership groups, et cetera, is my understanding.
Could we split the 2 days and if we are giving 2 additional days for preparation, could we split the 2 days to the 24th and the 31st? And Autumn, what do you think about the kids going 2 days? So your parent conference days would be the 1st and 2nd, and your kiddo days and your kid days would be the 3rd and 4th. Would that be a compromise here?
I think it could be. The only problem we might run into is that we'll have to probably take some of the preschool teachers prep time, because to get all their home visits in, because they usually have 30 kids because they have AM, PM, it usually takes them 3 days. So they don't usually start on that Wednesday, they start on that Thursday. But I mean, that could be something that we just take. So their first day would still need to be Thursday, Friday for us to do our transition that we had planned. So we'd have to take part of their prep day prior to the 2 conference days to finish the home visits with all of our parents.
I can't remember how many calendar days preschool has to have, but is it the same number? I believe it's not.
It's not the same amount. We already go over, there's a 10-hour a week limit, and we are at 12 hours a week. So we have that in addition. I just think it's helpful for our families if they know they're going to conferences these days, they have home visits those same days, and just we try to keep that schedule pretty consistent. So we could easily transition our preschoolers the next week. We just try to partner with our community sites too as well. So we try to work with Sacred Heart and Trinity for the community partners for that grant as well.
Yeah.
So you're right, we could start the next week and take some days off.
Okay.
Okay. Is there a motion on the floor here?
Could we clarify Pam's suggestion quickly? So that'd be to bring the teachers back on the 24th. I understand it was a suggestion, not a motion. And one of the PD days down and throughout the year would be shifted to the 24th, and then what would happen with the 31st? Would that be another PD day? That would be a day off for the teachers and students at the original scheduled PD day if it got moved?
I got confused, Jeremy, with the 2 days.
No, Jeremy, I think what she's saying is the 2 extra days you were talking about earlier on the first and second, where there'd be teacher development days or time for the teachers to work in their rooms more. Those would be moved and we'd have 2 less days of classroom instruction. Those 2 days, one would be the 24th, so they'd come in a day early. And the other one would be on the 31st. And so our kids would go from 179 instruction days to 177, which I believe is about the lowest it's been since I've been here on this board. I've always been an advocate of 180 days of kids in the classroom. And over the years, I've had a reputation for going against calendars that have not had 179 or 180 days of instruction instead of the hours. This year, I'm going to admit, I don't think we get 180 days with the COVID and what we need to do for our teachers. So that being said, going down to 177 is getting a little bit lower than I'd like to see. But since things are changing, unfortunately, our governor did not give us time to plan this, and that she set her rules. They were setting the rules June 1st, so we could have had the entire summer to be working on this. She kept changing her rules until the end of July.
Okay, my question now is, if we would go to the 177 days, how do our instructional hours come out?
One moment while I have Spring Beds recalculate that, Pam.
Thank you.
I agree with Brian that going down to 177 days may not be ideal, but our kids have been out of the classroom for 5 months now. So really any significant instruction time we can give them is going to be an improvement. I think teachers would like more than 2 days, but I think that they would probably be happy if we could squeeze in 2 days for them to prepare. So I like Pam's idea.
Yeah, lower days is better than nothing. And I think this is a new age and we need to be flexible in what we're doing. And yeah, so taking days from the end and putting it towards the beginning, we would hope for 180, but we need to just be hoping we're shooting for the minimum at this point just to try and get what we can in while we have it. So
Joy, if Pam's proposal would not take in, we would still finish June 4th. The only difference with her proposal is the kids would have 177 classroom days instead of 179 days, which is what the proposal from the administration right now is, 179 days. So that's the difference.
And we would still be okay on hours with extras to spare.
How
Because
many
my
hours would that
calculations
be,
are
Joe?
real quick.
How many hours in a day now, Jill? I don't know anymore.
I'm looking, well, I was in the portal, just kicked me out. Perhaps you remember the portal, Pam.
Maybe,
But
yeah.
a typical school day, when you take out the lunch minutes that you have to take out,
Yeah.
is about 6 3/4 hours. So we have
That's
enough to
what I
take
was
those,
thinking.
and we still have enough extra in there
Yeah,
for,
okay.
an
That's
early
How many
out
hours?
or release due to snow, those types of things.
Yeah.
Jill, how many hours does this calculate to be if we go 177?
At our lowest building, a quick calculation was 1155, but I really want to recalculate that before we add that to the actual
And
calendar.
I
That
believe
was
1080 is the minimum, is that correct?
correct. So it looks like, again, a very quick calculation, and I don't want to misspeak it. It could be off by a day, but even if I'm off by a day and we have 1155 in our lowest building, that still is an extra 75 hours that I believe we have in our calendar.
And this would not affect then your January date. You wouldn't have to get TQ approval. Everything would be good with doing this, as long as Autumn is okay with 2 days of instruction rather than 3 days.
Yeah, I think so. As I'm looking at it too, sorry, I just pulled that out as if that actually helps me hear you better. It doesn't. I think that will work, because I think what we can do is we can push preschool back, because the next week's Memorial Day. So it's a 4-day week anyway. So we're talking about having elementary start on the 3rd and the 4th. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think
Yes.
I think that would work. I think as long as I just don't want to take any PD or those prep days from my teacher. So as long as that's our like matches our normal plan but pushes back 2 days, I think that would work, and preschool could work around it.
I'm not sure I can repeat it, but I guess I move that we go to 177 days with 2 additional days at the front of the year for teacher PD, for them to work on getting ready for the year. Also giving get their PPE materials in, etc. And starting school then after, does that make it after Memorial Day?
No.
No, it makes it September 1st.
So let me paraphrase that for you, Pat. We would move that the teachers come back to school on August 24th, and then that we would start teach students on September 1st, which would move our total instructional days from 179 days to 177 days, with the same end date of June 4th and the same professional development days in October, January, February, and April.
And January.
Yes, I said January.
Yeah.
Thank you for paraphrasing that. Yes, that's my motion.
Okay. Is there a second to that paraphrase?
I will second that motion.
Okay. So one last time. Dr. Ms. Stephen moved and Dr. Nystrom seconded. 2, have the teacher start day being August 24th and the student start date being September 1st, with the elementary students coming back on September 3rd and the end day being June 4th. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Next is the employee handbook. Ms. Jaripa, any comments on the employee handbook?
Make sure I'm not muted. Good. So our employee handbook had very few changes in it. Essentially, we changed the links because the links were no longer active. They were linked to the wrong website. So we made sure that the links were corrected. We ensured that our purchase order processes were accurately reflected in current practices. And then the superintendent statement was changed. Those are the changes from the employee handbook.
Questions, comments? Hearing none, there a motion to approve the employee handbook.
Brian, can you put on speaker, please?
I'm sorry. Hearing no comments, is there a motion to approve employee handbook?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved by Dr. Nystrom, seconded by Mr. Pritchard to approve the employee handbook as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next is the YSS Kids Club MOA. Ms. Drupa, can you explain this for our new board members?
So the YSS Kids Club has a memorandum of understanding providing us the services. These are the same services that we've been provided previously. Those were indicated in your board packet as well as to the services that they provide our district. There are no changes to those. I did have an opportunity to meet with the YSS employees, and that was exciting because I think we found some resolution in how we can work through these different times together and ensure that we can still provide Kids Club when we return to school. So I would just recommend that we approve our memorandum of understanding.
One quick thing on there, I think we need to, on the authorization letter, it says Vice President of the School Board signing. I believe it should be President otherwise. I didn't see anything wrong with it. And we've done this for several years very successfully. Questions, comments from board members? Is there a motion to approve the YSS MOA?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. It has been moved by Reverend Weber, second by Mrs. Teben to approve the YSS MOA with a minor revision. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next is the resolution establishing community school district depositories. Mr. Lewis, I'll let you comment on this for us.
So this is just a resolution establishing the limits of the funds that we can get deposited in these accounts. Vision Bank is where all of our checking is 12 million. Bankers Trust, that's where our bond accounts are, and then ISJET is where we have our investments at 15 million.
And how long we've been with these three banks? Is that, or this is the only three places for a few years, hasn't it?
Yep, for quite a while. Yep.
Okay. Any questions or discussion from new board members? Mr. Pritchard? Hearing no further discussion, is there a motion to approve the bank depositories and limits?
Move to approve resolution establishing Boone Community School District depositories.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Pritchard, seconded by Ms. Steben to approve the resolution establishing Boone Community School District depositories. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next is the appointment of board secretary treasurer, Ms. Tripa.
So every year we need to appoint a board secretary and treasurer, and I would recommend that we appoint Mitch Lewis as the secretary and treasurer board. And I am used to the board president doing the oath of office, but am I to do that? Okay. So I would recommend that we appoint Mitchell Lewis as the board secretary and treasurer for the 2020-2021 school year.
Okay, is there a motion and a second for this?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved by Dr. Nystrom, seconded in a close battle by Mrs. Teben to appoint Mitchell Lewis as a board secretary treasurer for one more year. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Okay, Mr. Lewis. Okay, raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially do the best of your ability to discharge the duties of the office of board secretary in the Boone Community School District as now and hereafter required by law?
I do.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next is the indirect cost recovery for nutritional services, food and nutritional services. We just have a little explanation of this for our new board members.
Yep, so this is one of those annual things that we have every year. Currently, the general fund pays for utility costs, trash, equipment repairs, custodial services, business office costs, and then technology for the nutrition department. This just allows us to recoup some of those costs. In the past years, they've been around $50,000 or so. This year's a little less because we had not a full school year. So I recommend we move over $42,635.89. That still leaves the account at a good balance.
Okay, thank you very much. And this will be transferred directly into the general funds.
Correct.
Which will
Yep.
help for our budget for this coming year for all activities.
Yep.
Are there any questions from any board members?
I'd move to approve the cost recovery for the new nutrition fund.
Is there a second here?
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Pritchard, seconded by Reverend Weber to move the nutritional fund indirect cost recovery of $42,635.89 for the general fund. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion passes unanimously. Next, we have the North Central Consortium School Agreement. This is Trifa.
So this is a 20E agreement that we have every year with North Central Consortium. They have a continuum of services for students that can fill some gaps that we currently have as many districts in services at our district level. So we utilize this 28E agreement for students that may need services that we do not have on site. And I would recommend that we approve.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this issue?
Yeah, I just question in regards to this when it comes to like the online learning and all that. Because I know some of the students that were part of it last year, at least from my understanding from talking to a couple of parents, they didn't continue getting all the services that they were getting before when we went on shutdown. And I know we were in a whole new world last year and didn't know how to make certain things work, but just wanting to make sure, like, are those certain students going to be able to get all of the services that they may need into this next year?
So Joey, last year, the state allowed voluntary participation, and this year the state's not allowing voluntary participation. So even if it is all online, the difference between last spring and now would be that it's required. And there is a requirement by law that a free and appropriate public education is provided. So that would be how I would see it being different than last spring. And I would also just share that that was not unique to the consortium. That happened across the state, and that will not recur in the same manner, just simply because the rules that we're playing by are different this year.
Julie, I have a question. This is Pam. So would we abide by the decision of the consortium as to what our students would be offered in the event of a total remote learning situation?
So usually you have that agreed upon. The IEP would determine what the needs are. So that IEP would determine what that looks like, regardless of what the organization, just like public schools, we determine their needs based on that IEP and not necessarily by our services. So it's going to be pretty individualized. And I would argue that if they were going to move online and we were not, and we had the ability to provide services, we would do that instead of having them remain in the 28E agreement. It would just depend on each situation and the situation of our environment.
Question for Mitch then. Mitch, did we get reimbursed anything from last year's 28E?
We paid $28,000 right away. We ended up paying another $18,000 or $20,000. So we paid more than what we paid on that $28,000. So if we don't use it, we get it back.
Okay.
I believe this was a new consortium we entered last fall because we were.
This replaced Rabner's.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have some other agreements like this with a couple of different organizations. I remember,
Woodward
right?
is-
There's one with Woodward.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. I will entertain a motion to approve the North Central Consortium School Agreement.
Motion to approve North Central Consortium School Agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Reverend Weber, seconded by Dr. Nystrom to approve the North Central Consortium School Agreement as presented. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The motion does pass. Next is the interactive or activity interfund transfers. And I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Tripa and Mr. Lewis to explain this to our new board members.
So this is one of these annual things that we have to do every year. If you look on the attachment, when we close out the end of the year, our negative balances have to be cleared out. Activities accounts are in the gray. We use ticket sales to clear those out at the end of the year. Every other account that's negative, we work with the sponsor to get those cleared up, or we take it from a like one. I think orchestra was out, so we took it out of band. So we just kind of clean them up, and then Brett and I will work with the sponsors this fall to kind of correct these negative balances to make sure they're not running deficits.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Lewis or Mr. Collins or Mrs. Tripa? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the activity fund balances.
This is Pat. I move to approve the activity fund balance corrections.
Okay. Yes, okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Been moved by Ms. Stevens, second by Dr. Nystrom to approve the activity interfund transfers as presented by Mr. Lewis and Mr. Collins and Ms. Strupa. Any comments? Otherwise, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, the motion does pass. Next is our legislative resolutions. Boone School District, our board members, Superintendent, we are members of Iowa Association of School Boards. Each year, around this time of year, they put together proposals for lobbying efforts for the next school year. And at our last board meeting, the board members were all tasked with going through the legislative beliefs and coming up with their top 4 choices that were presented from the Iowa Association of School Boards. With that said, I'm going to just go around the room first and see who has what each person has as their top 4 picks. And I'm going to start with Pat.
Okay.
Stephen?
I have kind of combined, I guess, funding formula and supplemental state aid.
Can you give us the numbers?
I do not have them numbered. I'm sorry. I wrote them down on a separate sheet. I do not have
Okay.
that number.
Just a second here. Well, funding policy and supplemental school aid, because that's 18 and 19.
Okay. Mental
Those
health.
of you before you continue, we actually need 5. Top 5.
Good. Well, those are 2. I've got
Good.
5. Mental health.
Okay. I think that one is 7, if I remember right. Okay.
Teacher leadership and development.
12. Okay.
And teacher recruitment and licensure.
15. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Nystrom.
Okay, I had the first three. Well, I got rid of number one, but I believe that is research-based decision-making. Number two, standards and accountability. Number three, preschool. Number 18, school funding. And number 26, local accountability and decision-making.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Weber.
Yeah, I had number 7, mental health. Number 8, special ed at a state level. Number 12, teacher leadership and development. And number 30, homeschool reporting.
Okay. Mr. Pritchard.
Number 4, early literacy. Number 7, mental health. Number 12, teacher leadership and development. Number 18, school funding policy. And we need one more then. I'll do number 21, bond issues.
Okay. And I am last. I will say standards and accountability, number 2. Number 7, which is mental health. Number 18, which is funding. And 26, which is local governance and accountability. So it looks like everyone wants mental health. And I see 3 votes for number 12, which is teacher leadership and development. And then 18 and 19, which basically are saying the same thing. That is school funding. I'll be honest with you, guys, that gets it every year. So got 18, 19. Then you got 2 votes for 26. You got 1 for homeschooling. Let's see here. There's 1 for number 15, which is teacher recruitment and licensure. Actually, if I were to put another one, if I were to get my 5th vote in, it would probably be 30 on the homeschool. Pam, if you had a 5th one, what would you say your 5th one would be?
Well, I did have, I gave a 5th one, which was number 1, but then number 30 was on my list of 7. I started with 7. I could go for number 30 because right now, not everyone reports when they take children out of school because of legislative action a few years ago. So I could support number 30.
So 30 and 26, which is local accountability and decision making. Or
I like that one too.
Homeschooling are the 2. Jeremy, we've got all of yours except for 4.
I'd switch my bond issue one to number 26, local accountability and decision making. I don't have any problem with that.
Okay.
How many do we have to have, Brian, for the OSC?
We need 5.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Now what we could do is eliminate number 19, just at 18,
Yes.
and then do 26 and 30.
That sounds good.
Because 18 and 19 are pretty much
Very
kind of one
similar.
and the same.
Yeah.
Can you state what those are again the top vote getters?
Okay, yes, top mental health parity. And then,
And the number, please.
okay, number 7 is mental health parity. Number 18 is school funding policy. Number 12 is teacher leader. And 26 is a local accountability and decision making. And 30 is homeschooling accountability. Okay. Any discussion on those?
I guess I gotta put a pitch in for the one that nobody else voted on but me, but the teacher recruitment and licensure. We have trouble recruiting teachers in a lot of different areas and finding people or getting people to even go into the teaching field.
Mhm.
So anything we can do to get the legislature to do something to help, advertise and get more people going into the field would be beneficial. So I just have to throw that out.
Okay.
And I'll say, and I know Brian jumped onto it at the end there too. I feel like this year especially is important with the homeschool reporting, and maybe not even looking at just our district. I don't know what the numbers are for people who have pulled out from in school to go to homeschooling. But even just thinking about this as a state level, that's what we're talking about. I'm sure there's many districts across the board that are dealing with more and more people jumping into wanting to do homeschooling. I think it's really important that we have some sort of quantitative data on these new people who are attempting to do homeschooling. Just trying to figure out, where a homeschool student is actually at. These are potentially students that may come back after COVID, and we want them to be able to reintegrate well. So I think that's potentially an important one this year.
And my concern always with homeschooling is the possibility of abuse with these kids being isolated. So therefore, that's the other reason why I feel it's important that we have some type of accountability or contact with these kids to make sure that they are safe.
And considering that they previously had said there was no accountability, I would go for that.
Okay, so do we have a motion here on this? Because this is an action item we technically have to put together, and then I believe the people to my left, they put this together and sent it down to the Iowa School Board Association, which is without power for the rest of the week. Literally. No electricity. Is there a motion?
What do we say? We move to approve number 7, number 12, number 18, number 26, and number 30.
There has been a motion by Dr. Nystrom to approve numbers 7, 12, 18, 26, and 30. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Weber has seconded that motion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Is all in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed, no. That motion passes. We next are going to be talking about our return to learn plan.
Yes, so we have 2 items that we actually would like the board to act on tonight with regard to the return to learn planning. One would be our seniors and the classes that we are asking them to take. And I believe Mr. Byam will speak to that piece. And the other component is a matrix that we developed for metrics to use to determine how we move in and out of the different modes of learning. So I will show that on my screen when we get to that point, but I'm going to go ahead and have Mr. Byam explain what we're hoping to be able to do to accommodate our seniors and during this year. So Mr. Byam, you're up.
One of the things that we did last year when we transitioned to online learning was we gave seniors the opportunity to take the classes that they needed solely to graduate. And one of the things that we're anticipating is trying to lower class sizes as much as possible. And we want to be able to give the opportunity to our students to be able to, our seniors that are on pace to graduate, to take the amount of classes that they need solely to graduate this year. Obviously, you know, in the past that I've raised that standard with our graduation requirements and whatnot, but I also feel like this is a different year, and I think it's something that we probably need to take into consideration. One of the caveats to that is that the state associations for athletics or activities have stated that they must have at least four courses a semester. So that would stay in place for students that want to be involved in activities. But we have many students that are on the verge of graduating right at the end of first semester. And I want to be able to give them that opportunity if that's what they choose to do.
My main question or concern, and I just want to mention it, is that we still encourage students to take other courses when possible because of the required offer and teach requirements from the Department of Ed, making sure that we have enough students taking the courses that we have to teach. For example, career and tech ed, they have to be offered, they have to be taught.
Right.
So make sure we have enough students in them. So encouraging the seniors not to just take the minimum if they feel they can handle more.
And that's, we always try to encourage that, and we will definitely encourage that this year too.
I think the other thing with the seniors is they you have to understand that they can get some college credits. That second semester that will count for their high school. With the school sometimes, with our school district sometimes paying for those, such that they might be able to start as a second semester freshman in college, or even as a sophomore or second semester sophomore. Which if you knock off a year off college, that's probably $15,000 to $20,000 they're going to save in student loans.
Absolutely. And one of the things that Megan does an exceptional job is making sure that she's supporting and coaching them into classes that will help their futures. Obviously, that's something that with the EDGE program and the things that we've tried to develop, we continue to push that. And I don't think we will shy away from that. It's just we know that we have some students that are going to be looking for opportunities to get some extra work in, to help their families, things like that. Also, we feel that that could be a mitigation technique, if at all possible, to kind of lower numbers within the school also, if need be. So, you know, we'll continue to coach them. We obviously want them to be in school and taking all the classes. And then this is only for this year in terms of the kind of the COVID handbook. So it'd only be for the senior class, and we'd still continue to up the numbers as we've proposed in the past.
Does anyone have any other questions about that? If not, I'll move to share my screen because I want to be able to share with you. Well, I'm hoping that we can do one motion to approve our return to learn adjustments is what I'm hoping for. Unless you are wanting to approve one and not another, then you would need to do separate ones. But I'm hoping that we can do it all at once is what I'm hoping. So is everyone able to see my screen at this point? So one of the things that we were concerned about when the Department of Education came out with their metrics was that it only attended to our community spread numbers. And that would be that community positivity percentage at the top, 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, and 20 plus, which we think we absolutely need to be attentive to. However, we also feel that we need to be attentive to the dynamics that are occurring within our district. And so we wanted to come up with a model that would allow us to move in and out of the different modes of learning based on the data and the situation that we were in locally. And so what we have in front of you is a proposal that, and this is a district proposal, and I'll talk more specifically about buildings in a moment. But as a district, we will be fully on site based on our last board meeting with the online option. But if we were to experience a positivity rate of cases and symptoms in quarantine, so in other words, looking only at COVID symptoms with regard to those students. So if we have a positive case in a school, it's likely that we'll have others that will need to quarantine. Some of those students will have symptoms, some will not. So we're looking at only those students that have symptoms or have a positive case. If we are in the ranges of 2.5 to 10%, our proposal is that we'd move to hybrid, meaning that Schedule A, Schedule B for 2 weeks, and then reevaluate where we are with regard to our positivity rate. If we would remain in that 2.5 to 10% range district-wide, then we would remain in hybrid for another 2 weeks. If after the 2 weeks, we discover that we're down to 1%, we would move back to fully on site. The only time we would envision maybe not having a full 2 weeks is if we had a situation where we had numerous cases and we needed to move more quickly. So let's say we're fully on site and we were only fully in site for a week and suddenly we had another outbreak and we needed to move to hybrid. We want to be able to move fairly quickly to that hybrid model. When you start getting into the 10% illness rates and higher, even before COVID, we would normally work with our public health department to determine what our steps should be as a school district. And they would let us know whether they felt we needed to have school, like call school off and have cleaning throughout the buildings, or if we should remain in session. So we envision if the community spread is still low, but our district spread is higher, that we would still follow that normal process of working with our public health. But realistically, if we have such an outbreak that we are that high in illnesses in the district, it's probably likely our community spread is higher and we would be applying to the state for approval to go to online only. So our proposal is that we would have at least a metric to work within these different modes of learning so that people would know when we were going to be in what mode of learning. If we have instances, for example, say we have students at Page Elementary, and that's the only place that we have that situation, and it's exclusive to one classroom, we may have that classroom quarantine and everyone else would remain on site. That would not be something that we would move our entire district for. So when we're looking at this model, we're looking at this only when we're looking at cases across the district. If we can isolate by building or by grade level or less, then we will do that as well. Because again, our goal is to have students in school as much as possible. But we just felt that waiting till we had community spread up to 15% to move to hybrid, and then even the 20%, that was maybe not being proactive enough, because moving to the hybrid model is simply another mitigation strategy. And we're looking to be more proactive rather than reactive. So that would be our proposal, that we would utilize this particular graphic as we move throughout the year. Keeping in mind that if we get new guidance, that may need to change. But this is something that we're hoping that we could use so that at least families would have an idea of how they would know when we would move into that model or not. The other thing we want to emphasize to families is that if they have a child who happens to have been in contact with someone who tests positive, and contact at this point would mean that they were within 6 feet of that individual for at least 15 minutes, that they will have to quarantine for 14 days. So that's something that they would be notified of that, and that would be separate from this. We're talking about more widespread illness when we're looking at this model. Questions?
I guess I'm a little bit concerned about just the 2.5%. If that isn't too low, I'd kind of like get some comparison numbers here. I look and I think about Page, which has, how many kids you got in Page? About 150. So you take 150. That basically means if you get 3 kids with COVID, that potential building would have to close with just 3 kids. And
Actually, so let us clarify that. Autumn, you want to go ahead and speak to that, because that's exactly what we want to avoid. When we're looking at this particular model, we're talking district-wide.
Yeah.
So we're talking about 50. When you talked about the numbers, 2.5 would be about 50 illnesses. But by building, if Autumn had a situation and maybe it was just in one classroom, that classroom may just all go online.
Right.
We would proceed as normal.
Yeah, so we was thinking about like my sections being smaller than like the high school that's all in one spot. We would want that opportunity to say, okay, you know, just there's 3 in this classroom. We're going to put all of this classroom online, or just, you know, in, you know, at Page only, we'd put all of, like, let's say they're spread out, we would put all Page online. So we want that flexibility to, again, keep the most of our students that we can at school while keeping them safe and healthy. Because with that low number too, if we have, let's say we have 3, along with those 3, there's probably at least 16 kids that may have to be quarantined based on where they sit. And so there's other kids out as well. So that's why when you look at that number, it sounds like it might only be 3 kids, but as we think about kids that may need to be out, you know, for quarantine or might have symptoms or other things, we want to make sure that's it. And we also really wanted to, when influenza season and some of those other things hit, we are hit pretty hard. And that's why we're looking at that population that have COVID cases or exhibiting COVID symptoms. So, you know, we're also looking at a specific population of them, not necessarily kids that have influenza or kids that, you know, have a stomach flu or something like that as well.
what, in the past years, when we have a good influenza outbreak or a large influenza outbreak, what has our absentee rate gotten to in either January or February when we've had those high rates? Have we gotten up to the 3, 4, 5% district wide? Have we ever gotten that high? Have we ever gotten to?
I don't know
10%?
district wide.
I think we've had a couple times.
We've had to report before. We've got about 10% at Page and Lincoln. So we report by building. I don't know by district.
I'm just curious, because how often have we gotten to that 50 number just with influenza? I'm trying to get a perspective for the families.
Correct. And when we talked about it, I think we talked more by building, that it was not unusual for buildings to hit that 10%.
Yeah.
But district wide, I'm not sure that was part of our conversation. But I will say that when we were trying to determine this number, we did explore the thought of 5%, but we felt that was waiting too long to go into that mitigation piece with the hybrid with regard to specific COVID symptoms. Because what we don't want is to confuse this with flu season. We're not talking about 2.5% of flu symptoms. We're talking about just the COVID related illnesses. So when you have someone who tests positive, you usually have people who have to quarantine. Of those people that quarantine, we'll know who's symptomatic and who's not. So we were looking at just those numbers that were symptomatic is what we were looking at.
Okay.
So that brings up a really good question. What are going to be the symptoms that we're looking at? Because there are enough of the flu symptoms that mimic the COVID. What are we looking at? Just to clarify for our parents.
And I don't know if Dr. Milhouse, if you can talk to this or not, but we were talking about, you know, oftentimes parents might call in and say, they have influenza, their brother and sister had influenza, they probably didn't get tested. I'm assuming in the upcoming year that more families will probably get tested, whether or not it's influenza or COVID, just as we're trying to collect numbers as a public health standpoint. So you're nodding your head a little bit. I don't know if that's true or not, but we were kind of thinking that we might have more clarity on what's influenza and what's COVID.
I think a lot of the symptoms are the same, so it's going to make it tougher. I expect this year we're going to be swabbing a lot more kids and adults for influenza, just so that we can say they have influenza. Unfortunately, I suspect as we had this spring, as we had a few patients that had both influenza and COVID. So it's not going to be you got one, you can't have the other one. So it's going to make it confusing for the medical providers. A little bit reassuring if you got influenza A, influenza B. Influenza probably does not have the loss of taste and loss of smell as much as the COVID does. Both can have cough, body aches. COVID's shortness of breath is much more prominent than the influenza one is. So there are some ways for medical providers to try to get an idea. Of course, if they have a positive COVID test, it makes it a whole lot easier. We're going to be testing more COVID patients. I just was notified today that our hospital got in from the state an additional 480 test kits for the state hygienic department. They're sending all these out to the different hospital and testing groups because they recognize that once school gets started, we're probably going to be doing more testing instead of less, especially since we got DMAC sitting here and we can get a little spillover from Iowa State. Plus for our elementary, junior high, and high school students going back at the end of this month or September 1st. So it's going to be a moving target on this. It'd be great if they have strep. If they have influenza, it'd be great if they have strep. We can push those off to the side and not count those. So a lot of these other ones, we're going to have to count as the percent on site with symptoms because we won't be able to throw them into a different category.
Well, and I think, again, if it's just isolated to a building, then this is not something that we would make the whole district go hybrid because of one building. So that's the other thing is this was enacted with the thought that say we had scattered symptoms throughout the district, at what point did we feel we needed to move to hybrid? And that's where we were coming from with that, because I do think with some of the cohorting that we're doing and some of the mitigation strategies, it is likely that we will be working with individual buildings more frequently than we would be utilizing this as a district, but we just wanted to make sure we had that opportunity so that we weren't reacting and instead we were being proactive.
I think
But we would welcome the medical perspective with regard to the percentages, because that's the part that was hard for us because we were not, none of us are medical professionals, and we want to make sure we're doing things proactively.
I think this was very well thought out. I thank you guys for this.
I got one question on the left-hand side there. It says percent of on-site population who are absent with COVID cases and or exhibiting COVID symptoms. How are we relying on people to self-report their symptoms? Are we going to have someone dedicated to following up with families in quarantine to screen them for symptoms? How are we going to track that number to make it as accurate as possible?
We really thought we'd like to reach out to our school nurses because they offer so much insight and knowledge that way too, and they partner so closely with our families anyway. And so we're going to utilize them to partner, because I think that's something that we wrestled with a lot was, how do we define that? How do we get lost? I was really worried because between, November and February, depending on the influenza year, our numbers get pretty high, especially with little people and their noses. And so if we could get somebody to follow up with some of those symptoms that were in quarantine, having it be a target person, so we know that's happening and we can ensure that happening, that's something that our team discussed would be a good course of action.
As it stands right now, and maybe this is something that Dr. Melhouse can speak to, is the fact that if there is a positive case, we're likely going to hear from families before public health will necessarily, or it'll be us reaching out to public health to help us do some of the contact tracing, is my understanding.
No, that is correct, because public health can be 1 to 2 days before they get the official notification. The patient and the family are notified first as soon as the physician sees the report. But that report then bounces back down to the state before it comes out to the patient's county of residence. Depending upon when the state decides to break for lunch or decide to go home at 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, you may hear about in 24 hours, may hear about in 3 days' time. That's been going on this entire crisis. So we'll have 2 or 3 that we know about, because either they're in the hospital or we've transferred them out, and we don't hear officially on the record for 2 or 3 days' time. That's number one. And the home health nurse or public health department will be able to make some contacts. My one concern we have is if we're starting to get more cases, I don't think we can rely on our school nurses to do that, because they are going to be so busy, because they're going to start having the walking wounded coming down, and to have them making all these phone calls and yet also taking care of the ones that are newly sick, I would be concerned that they're not going to have enough. Plus, third thing they're going to have to do is taking care of their normal jobs. So I'm kind of wondering, do we need to have some assistance, or we need to have someone else in help making these phone calls?
So we do have someone that we have in mind that can have those phone calls, that has the nursing background, that's not a currently acting nurse on staff. So that's something that we have considered, but that we are looking to have a point person, because we do understand that it will be quite the job when we're in the middle of things. So but that's something we don't have solidified as far as the amount of time that we think that person will need. I do know some districts have hired people solely for that, but we're trying to find ways to do that within our existing staff currently.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we weren't overburdening our nursing staff, because their first priority has got to be taking care of the kids that are in the building.
We did have them be part of this conversation as well, because again, we are not medical professionals, and wanted to have some feedback with regards to some of the thinking processes that we were following.
Okay. Yeah, the other thing we have to remember here is this is all a moving target. We can do so much, and then they can come in 2 weeks later and say no, or they come in with their own proposal that's going to trump this.
Yes, and so this is for right now. This is our proposal. I just like everything else, it would be subject to change. But again, we were feeling uncomfortable just waiting for us to be in the midst of some cases before we made decisions. We wanted to be proactive in our measures. So we would like some feedback from the board about what we're planning to do.
This is Pat, and I move to accept the return to learn 2 items that they have presented tonight.
I have one more question.
Oh, we should have
Before we have any more questions, I have a motion on the floor. I need to see if there's a second to that motion. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Stevens, seconded by Mr. Pritchard, to accept the recommendation for the restriction of classrooms. By the way, does that also?
Yeah, that also.
We're going to do that, and then we'll go back to Mr. Byam's issue, or else I got to get into amendments to
my motion was for
motions.
Both. My motion was for both.
For both? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, as long as it's for both. Okay, now we can have discussions.
Okay, I just have one question. When I read that chart, it applies to a teacher as well, right? If a teacher becomes ill, then
So we have the teachers and the students put together all in one group. And we also had the caveat at the top of that, that if we are short guest teachers, that we may need to take other measures that may not match that chart.
okay.
Further discussions? Hearing no further discussions, all those in favor of the motion to approve the superintendent's recommendations, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Is there anything else, Ms. Tripa, on the return to learn? If not, we'll go to the superintendent's report.
Excellent. So I just wanted to give some updates. It's somewhat related to return to learn, but I think it's important for our community, our staff, and for all of you to be updated with regard to our final results with regard to the online registration. We did land with approximately 15% of our student population signing up for the online option. We are also currently cross-checking that with the survey information that had indicated a much higher interest in online to make sure that families that had expressed interest indeed changed their mind and did not want the online option, so that we're making sure that anyone who had desired that was able to have participated with the online option. But right now it is holding pretty steady at the 15% across the district. We had just over 400 families sign up for transportation. We're in the process of trying to organize that in a manner to make sure that we have as few students as possible on each bus based on the needs that were provided to us. We also have completed about 2/3 of the barriers that we need in the district. And there was another call put out today for continued volunteers that might be interested in helping us finish those barriers for the different buildings. That would be fantastic. We've got it, again, in talking with Mark, he thought we had about 2/3 of them completed. We also have ordered air purifiers for all of the classrooms that the students would be in. That's something that I think is unique to our district. And the purifiers have HEPA filters of 13 that is supposed to actually be able to help mitigate that to some degree, and it would exchange the air for every half an hour. That is something we had hoped to do at each building, but our systems, our HVAC systems, can handle up to 8. So that's one of the reasons we did purchase the air purifiers. That was just recently done. And let's see what else I had that I wanted to make sure I shared. Oh, and we do have our face shields and masks for all of our staff. Those are all in. So every staff member will receive both the mask and the face shields, and those will be distributed soon as well. So I think, we're making good progress. I feel that, we are putting a great amount of effort into trying to layer our mitigation strategies for our students and our staff, so that we can make sure that when students are here, they're in a safe environment and our staff is in a safe environment. So we're hoping that we're doing all of this planning so we don't need to use it. So hopefully we don't need the chart that we developed. That'd be fantastic. But we're trying to put these measures in place so that if we need to, we have those already thought out. And again, we're being proactive rather than reactive. So just wanted to make sure that you were updated on the results of those registrations.
Okay. Questions for Ms. Tripa?
I got a question for Brett. There was some major announcement in college sports with some conferences canceling football specifically. Do you anticipate anything in the pipeline for our athletics or activities this fall?
Could you unmute, Brett?
Unmute.
Yeah, I can do that. We haven't had any notification from the union or the association that they are making any changes to schedules. I know that there has been continued updates with some guidelines and some guidance, concession stand and spectators and things like that. But no plans at this point to deviate from fall sports.
Other questions from the board?
I have one question. I'm concerned, I guess, a little bit about the fall musical.
I'm going to let Brett speak to that. I think he's had conversations or no about the fall musical.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
That's okay. The question was about the fall musical, and I believe that you've had some preliminary conversations about how that might be able to be accomplished in a different manner than normal.
Yeah, correct. We're looking at options on that. It might not be the musical like we are planning on having. We were able to host a couple of outside things in our facilities this summer to see how that would go. And there was some separation of seating and the possible live streaming that we're able to get licensing for. So those are still a work in progress. We'd like to have a fall musical if at all possible, but we're still going through the list of specifications if we can make that happen. We're also checking with other conference schools, which we have an AD conference meeting tomorrow to kind of check in with what everybody is capable of doing, especially in comparable school districts.
Thank you.
I have a question that's not COVID related, and maybe you can't. So I'm just wondering if we can get an update on the potential new elementary, where we may be with all of that. We haven't talked about that in a while.
As far as the counts, as far as like enrollment, is that what you're saying, Joey?
No, the
building. No, the elementary building.
Oh, the building. Oh.
I believe it's on a standstill right now. We're talking with some attorneys yet. Hopefully we'll have an update in the next month at the next month's meeting, if not sooner. Mr. Pritchard, myself, and Ms. Trooper, we've had some meetings with other parties involved, and we hope to be able to make some public statements in the next 30 days.
The biggest thing, Joey, is going to be we're going to have to regroup and decide when we should attempt a bond. So that's going to be the major decision for us this fall. I had one more question. I was wondering if the online registrations had any negative impacts on class sizes or how things are distributed currently or need to be shuffled. Are there any grades or any areas of concern with being too big or too small in terms of class sizes because of the option people chose?
I will let the principals speak to that at each of their buildings. When we first started, I would say we were more alarmed than by the time we ended with the registration, but I will let them each speak to that piece.
We'll start from the bottom, lower levels. So Autumn.
Our numbers are looking good. In fact, I just readjusted. We had enough for a whole section at one grade level. And so we were able to shift those kids. And right now, if everything stays the same, they will not need to change buildings. That would be one of my concerns is when you only have 3 sections and you pull out one section, then you can only fit them in so many places. And just by a miracle, it's worked so far. So I don't think I'll need to move them. But there will be something new enrollments. Even if you live next door to this building, you'll have to go to the other building, which is only 0.8 miles away. So that will be part of this as well. But our class sizes look really good because we've been able to be flexible with the 1 grade level. We actually have 2 grade levels that don't have an entire class, and so we've been flexible with some personnel and some people that will give us some flexibility as we go in and out of that online model. The tricky part too has been because we pull them out now in 9 weeks, which is the end of October, we'll readjust, and so we have to somehow leave them a spot Some of those people may not have a spot in the same building that they were previously attending. It may need to be in a different building, but that's how we have it figured out right now. So I would say negatively, class sizes are not super large. We do have first grade that are at about 23, and so that's higher than we normally like. But last year we had a couple at 23 and 24, so I wouldn't say it's negatively impact anything that way.
Brad Winter has joined us. Mr. Winter.
I would probably say fairly similar to Autumn. We could probably use a couple more students to join our online cohort at 2nd and 4th to bring our on-site class sizes down a little bit, but we're in a lot better shape than we were on Friday when I looked as far as our sizes of our on-site classrooms. We're at about 25 and 26 in 4th grade, I believe, and 23 and 24 in 2nd grade, which I would echo what Autumn said. It's probably a little bit higher than we would like, but not so high that it's not manageable for us.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Right now, we are at about 110-ish that have signed up for online, about 20 in 5th grade, 28 in 6th, 33 in 7th, and 33 in 8th. So our bigger numbers are at 6, 7, 8. We're a little heavier. I guess we talked a little bit about it's helped with the section be where we're at. I think it helps us in that area where we were talking about, especially 5th and 6th graders with those smaller groups that divided out evenly, which sometimes doesn't happen in sections, but that gives us an average of 5th grade 20 students per class, 6th grade 22 students per class, and 7th and 8th grade 25 students per class. So I'm still nervous about that transition of 9 weeks of how they come in and how we facilitate that. I'd say I guess the double-edged sword of balancing out classes is also new enrollment, which is a blessing. I know across we've talked about that a little bit and we've gotten great numbers. I know at the middle school level, we're at 50 right now for new students. So with the students that we've taken in there, that's something we're always excited about every year, but it's a little nervous to be excited about that when we're trying to balance classes as well. So right now our numbers are looking pretty good, and just looking forward to seeing how we continue to manage those numbers.
Okay, thank you very much. And I believe Mr. Byam, I saw you on line here a little while ago. Yep, you're still here.
Our class sizes, we're typically done with this portion of things back in May, and we're building the master schedule right now. And so we're very behind the 8 ball, but because we're having to adjust at each subject area to try to balance for the online kids. Right now we have 111 online students that have signed up. And so in a lot of cases, we're able to take, for instance, because we've cohorted the 9th grade and the 10th grade, we're able to take, for instance, a class of algebra and cohort them into an online class and drop our numbers down. Obviously, if things change and students are coming back, then we're going to have to tackle some other issues. The other thing that we've done is looking at different online tools to help support and minimize kind of the amount of classes that are out there. So for instance, for our talented and gifted students, Bell and Blank offers an online AP chemistry class. And so we've moved some of our students to that through the University of Iowa, which I think is a good quality program. We were talking about utilizing that for other AP classes already with our Excel teacher. So that was something we were looking at anyway. So we've kind of added that portion of things. But there are a couple of areas that I have some concerns on, and we're adjusting it as we go. So I'm literally going through the scheduling wizard right now and trying to make sure that our master schedule is aligned, and then we will hopefully run a full fill here in the next couple of days.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think that's one thing that I'd put out there for parents too, especially at the secondary level, because I know we've mentioned that and we put the deadline for the sign up for online and get ready to do that. But like Mr. Byam was talking about how Infinite Campus works, even when we're able to run that schedule, which we're hoping that we're getting close to, it usually takes 1 to 2 weeks to balance things out and fix classes after we run that. And so it might do something like I can put a parameter of 20 students in a class, and it might still schedule 60 students in that class. So then we have to go in and clean that up and rebalance those students to other sections to make it work. So when I say best case scenario, I've balanced it at 20 students in a class. Sometimes it takes weeks and weeks of tedious work to get there. So once we see those out and we run it, sometimes those schedules go live and then we're changing them back and forth. And classes are changing continually until we get those section balanced. So even with the extra time that we've been given, and we were probably going to be right up to the start date till we have set schedules ready to go for students. So
Yeah, we're just going to have to be very flexible in what we're doing and where the expectations are, because I know that Megan and Brian, our counselors, are sitting there waiting, and I have everybody that can have access to it ready to go so that we can go through them and make sure that, you know, our main objective right now is to make sure that semester 1 is ready to go. Semester 2 might not look that great because everything's fluctuating so much. So, you know, we've changed things 3 or 4 times already. I've changed things again this week. And so that might even fluctuate again going into second semester. So.
Okay, thank you. One last question I have.
The online students will have an opportunity or a time where they go pick up books or materials, or how is that? How's that?
I can address that. I would say that I met with my 3 online teachers and Mrs. Burial today, and we started making a list of things that we need to problem solve, and that was on the top of the list. How will we get students reading books and materials that they need? So that group now has kind of formed a cohort, and they're going to be working through some of those issues, and at least at the elementary level. I don't know if it'll be the same at middle and high school, of how we're going to get those materials back and forth from school to home.
So it sounds like another project detail that our administration's working on, and we won't need to go into fine detail about that. One last question I've had from a few parents is, our kids who are doing online in the junior high and high school, are they going to be able to participate in the extracurricular programs or not? Because that seems a little bit counterintuitive. So what is the rule? Is there a state rule on this, or is this going to be a local rule, or what do we know?
There really isn't. We've had a discussion about that in our leadership team too. I know that students in the past that have been dual enrolled have been able to participate in activities and athletics. And so since this is a district program that's being offered, then we would grant that ability for them to participate in activities and athletics. Yes, it is a little awkward when they're at home because of the virus, and then coming and participating, but at the same time, that gains them access to being involved in athletics and activities, being a Boone Community School student.
But are they potentially bringing in the virus to our bubble by doing that? I think that's something that we probably need to take a look at and see if we can get any directives from the State High School Athletic Associations.
So far, all of the guidance that we've been given was to allow them to participate because, again, homeschool assistance programs do allow them to participate. The co-curricular activities are a different story, I believe, but the extracurriculars are the ones that they're able to participate in.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, I just had that question asked by several parents.
And luckily, especially in the fall, a lot of our activities and athletics are in different venues. You know, they're either outside, they're coming directly to the gym, but they would follow the same protocols and guidelines that we have for students in our building as well.
Okay. Hearing nothing else, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. And when's our next meeting? I believe we don't meet until September. Do we have a special meeting called because the governor or the state has changed the rules again? The next meeting will be September 14th, so hopefully we're 2 weeks into a very successful school year. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Dr. Nystrom, seconded by Mrs. Teben to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is adjourned.